An encrypted message
it
or a
comes to this
cipher presents us with a
esoteric guy.
strange paradox,
Again,
a deeply
at the square.
unsettling repulsion, and yet at the
Should
same
be the tone
time
today's
an
end of the
eroticism
day
of
review, because it
representation.
might just well be
Its
my
message
last.
unflinchingly
I might
stares
not
out
even
to
go in
us,
on
and
Monday,
yet,
bother calling
as
or
we
anything.
stare back into it,
Fuck them.
otherwise familiar
$15
letters and
bullshit
numbers
at the
refuse
square.
to yield
There's the
their
saw.
underlying
Where's your
meaning.
turnover rate? Let's
We're
look at
invited
your
to peer
fucking nuts
into the
and
message,
bolts.
and yet
Actually
the
do a
cipher
teardown
refuses
on
to
your
yield.
Badass
That it
manuscript.
holds a secret is
Your
all
people
the more
grinding. If
enticing.
there,
Indeed,
then the
the
shadow
only thing
problem has to be
worse
glassed
than a
across the board.
cipher
You'll see things
is
like,
a
see the center
solution
mass right here? It's the
to that
it's the
cipher.
1,000-pound
The
air
mystery
crane comparatively to
evaporates,
the
and we're
600
left a
one.
bit bereft,
And if you know
having
square
traded
footage,
the
it's 18
allure of
pounds
the esoteric
a foot per
for the
2-inch, I
plainness
think is what
of
it is. So
everyday
that's 50
meaning.
or 90
Of
pounds
course,
ish
adding
for
centuries
a
of
5-footer,
trappings of
right?
the
So
occult
even if you had to
deepen
do the
that
math and find
allure.
2-inch,
And
do the
further,
difference,
surrounding
you
that
need
cipher were
30 footers
equally alien
and
vistas of
18-inch to
unknown
not do it.
flora,
So what's the difference? The pad,
astrological wheels,
the width on the
seeming
pad, the
glimpses
crack,
of the cosmos
the height,
itself,
the system, and you
scores
can
of
kind of tell when somebody hadn't been in there
naked
and like,
nymphs
yeah, I
in
got you the big
interlocking
one, and I'm the mechanic,
and
and
vast
get
lists
the
of
hell out of
apparent
my way.
pharmacological lore,
Really,
often
you know, on the first day,
solidifies the
few days, you can't
seductive
change
power
nothing. Why? Because
of that
everything has to be
mystery.
this. Unless it's
Every
broken,
single
don't
page seems
change
bursting with
anything.
meaning, and yet as we
Nothing.
pore over page
You know, this is the one
after
where the dude
page,
redoes the
mystery
church
only
book
deepens, and we find ourselves
overnight
fully in
on
the
vellum.
grips of a secret that seems so
What
close,
those stations are. Rich
and
and
yet
the other
remains
guys
so
are supposed to be
far
on that
away.
for early
The
review
apparent
inside of the
medieval
system
cipher of the Voynich
about what
manuscript
that
filled with
is
hundreds
for
of
what
pages
it
of such
is in
mysteries
terms
is
of the
the
frame rate
paragon
based
of
on
just
why you
such
want
a
to do that
seductive
stuff
enigma.
once.
Though in the
Get
past
it
2
done.
decades,
Some
truly
plant
contemporary cryptology,
system
statistics,
system.
and information theory, along with
But
a
they're going to
host
go
of other material
botany
sciences have
to
been brought
chemistry
bear
to medicine,
in the desperate
alchemy,
hopes
you
of
know,
a solution
whatever you may be
for
having a
just
term
that
of the
text.
time to say.
But
And that's
are
fine.
we
It works
any
great with any
closer to
apprentice. I can
unlocking
use
the
that same
mystery of
system.
the Voynich manuscript? In this episode,
Right here.
I want
The
to
difference
explore what
is
is increasingly becoming
the
a
metal
viable
binders
position on that
or
question, that the
your
Voynich manuscript
bigger books
itself
that get
does
locked
hide a
out. You want to do
secret,
blockchain,
but that
it would
secret
be that
isn't
plant
the
as far as the stem
meaning
grow.
behind
And
elaborate
their stems
encryption.
got to grow as far as their
Rather,
stubs
the
when you're
secret
paying
is
your
that the
dues.
Voynich manuscript
That's
itself
usually
may
what that
well
is
be
against what the
a
Turk
medieval
Empire or
hoax.
Ottoman Empire is
Using
going to be
robust
in the
computational
bulk of the
analysis,
CMB here.
statistics, and information theory,
Yeah, the
scientists
whole
and scholars
Turkish
may
army.
be
It's like,
inching
so
their
you're going to
way
have to be
to
like
unlocking
proficient
just
at
how
that
an
level.
apparent
Corn in
medieval
Nebraska,
cipher is
stone
actually
and
generated
stonemasons.
using a
And it is kind of one of those
quasi-algorithmic
things
process
that's just like
while incredibly
information for the
simple,
year, early
produces
phase inside of the
effects that have
system.
baffled
You're more
cryptologists
looking for
for
other things because
centuries.
you can
If you're
train
interested
out
in
some
magic,
bad
hermetic
habits,
philosophy,
if you will.
alchemy,
Or
Kabbalah,
how
or
they're
the
thinking,
history
you
of
know,
the
be
occult,
right there for it
make sure
instead
to
of
subscribe
over the
here to
shoulder, whatever it
Esoterica,
may be.
and check out my other topics on
Esoterically,
contents
in the
and
stone that
esotericism,
inch, 2x2
including
is out the door.
curated
You know, crack,
playlists.
read,
Also,
mark,
if you want to
do
support my
things. If
work
there
of
was a
providing
camera, something's always
accessible,
watching.
scholarly,
Why?
free
Because it's always
content on
quantum
topics
law,
and
even if
esotericism here on
somebody's not.
YouTube
The
for
inverse
free.
pilot
I
theory
hope
on
you
that
consider
stuff
taking a look at my Patreon.
early in,
Perhaps
they're
consider a
likely
one-time donation
super
to the
high
channel,
probability
or
not
you
having
can
their
even use
system.
the nifty super
They're doing
thanks option
different
just
stuff.
below the
They had
video
to
if
break
you want to
the
do
first
that.
one.
But now, let's turn to cutting-edge research on the Voynich manuscript
And those things
and how
happen.
its
And that's
meaning
why
has
they're super
proved
high probability.
elusive,
Usually why a big dog like me is
precisely
going to
because
do
only
something
the
like that. Could have been
appearance of
epically
meaning
worse
was
amongst the
perhaps
system. You
ever
usually
there
call it blue just training you,
begin with,
retraining you.
that it may well be
But it's
an elaborate
Army's going to be a
medieval
little different because they
hoax.
one-shot wonder that stuff
I'm
and put them
Dr.
down.
Justin Sledge,
And
welcome
so when you do a
to
90-day
Esoterica,
station
where
setup,
we
but you
explore
hold
the
post,
arcane
rock,
in
whatever,
history,
you know, the show,
philosophy,
YouTube, you know, so
and religion.
those would be your leisures inside what that is there. And so they work on very different gravity crypto. There's various Bell's inequality to the Minkowskian spaces. Oppenheimer may not qualify in certain spaces. And that graphs. Why? Because, well, the graphs on you know science, I know science, hit the rock. See how you run that line.
Typically, people interested
You're gonna
in
know
topics
where that
of
is,
esotericism
the very
find that
specific
over
thing when you're
time,
walking
those interests tend
somebody
to
through,
broaden.
trying to show
From
Samantha
an
how to
interest
do it
in
today. You know, like
astrology
this
may
what
come
it
an
is.
interest
They
in
just gave me
medieval
this. There's a
medicine,
thing on the
from
back of it. You gotta
alchemy
watch
to
the pressure gauge
symbolism,
doing its thing.
more generally,
Absolutely every
from
single time. These are
magic in
big
the
ones.
contemporary
They
period
bite.
to the theory of its mechanics
Feet
and Renaissance
over
philosophy.
the angle.
As you
So you
probably can imagine, imagine,
you don't do
many
that.
of
Well,
those
anyways,
roads
then you get them
will
on rail.
eventually lead
Gentles.
to an interest
Gentle.
in hidden meanings more generally,
Pushing
and
through.
the Voynich
feed it through the
manuscript
machine,
stands at the
then you're gonna
crossroads
rack
of
them back. Rack them back, and
of
9-footers is
interests.
always a fun day.
Of course,
Nah,
I've done
me,
episodes
they're
on the
4-footers.
origins of
I
magical
can
symbols in
one-hand
Greco-Roman
those from the
Egypt,
middle,
the quasi-constructed
so not too
language
bad.
and alphabet of Hildegard of Bingen's Lingua Ignota. There are whole
then you're gonna
playlists
line
that
them
I've
up.
produced
It's on the
on
offset
alchemy
there. I
and
think
its
it's
symbolism,
3/16
the
of an inch
algorithmically
kerf.
produced
You
book of
compensate
Soiga,
for
had
with
by
no
Dr.
gel.
John Dee,
I've run jigs. I've
of course,
Devonian,
a whole
Tompkins,
series on the so-called
Johnson
Enochian
and
alphabet
Johnson
and
Roads.
language
You
revealed
got
to be in Kelly.
Delaware
My
Basin
interest
Stone,
and likely
Double Axe Stone
your
Supply, the
interest
whole
in the
knife
Voynich
hand.
manuscript should come as no surprise to anyone. Even as a teenager,
The great
I
woodworker
volunteered
was
in the
fun, of
European
course,
Voynich manuscript
landscaping crew
transcription team.
keeps
I
that one
carried
tight,
my black and
banger.
white photostat copy around in my car so that I could work on it if I ever got spare time. I even got that
This
text
one is,
from Yale
again,
for my, like,
I'll pop you
17th
real quick because I'll
birthday
take some big
before
dogs down
any
with
facsimiles
this
were
is
being
a
published or
50-yard,
online images were
50 feet
available at all.
field, not the
As a
70
dedicated
with a 60,
amateur, I banged my head against the mystery
66.5
for
or
some years, making
60.6
no
feet
more
to the
headway
base,
than anyone else.
then
I'm sure
and
less
go
headway
in
than
calculus on how to
certain
throw the ball,
experts.
do the training
And
camp
as
in
the
here.
new
You are a
millennium
Mason,
rolled
and in order to do it
major
safe for
transcriptions into
insurance,
machine-readable code
this
were finished.
equation,
And as far as I'm concerned, the
if you
matter
will,
would be worked out in a
pop
few
off
years
on
under
one
the
of the perspectives,
brute
A and B and
force of
Feynman. That's a
modern
big one.
computational
And Ketters
analysis
run around like to
and
use those things like
cryptography.
Uru tips.
There was just no way
Back off.
any of us were going to compete by hand. But in the 2 decades that have followed, the Voynich is
You
still
tell the ROTC,
no
why are you
closer
standing
to
around with
decryption.
anything less than a
In
pencil in your hand?
fact, the informational mystery has only gotten deeper. But before proceeding, I'll just say that this episode is not meant to be a primer or an introductory
I like beat up
episode
mountains.
on the
I'm going
Voynich
for that
manuscript. I'm going to
3-story
assume some
marble
basic
piece
familiarity
that
with the text, its history, and
Michelangelo
previous
left
attempts
laying
at
behind.
decipherment. But
Blockchain.
I've included a link in the card above for a great primer by the Histocrat if you really want to review that first to get into the world of Voynichology. But, briefly, the Voynich manuscript, or more properly Yale Banki manuscript 408, is an apparent medieval cipher manuscript of about 240 pages. It is
for a
heavily
Mason, the
illustrated
Sentinel
and is usually broken
secretary
down into an herbal section,
is a
astronomical,
station.
and
You got beat up one of the
balneological
boys
sections.
on the
That's
graphics and
the
which
section
way
with those
does it, and then
strange
you can do
naked
graphics,
nymphs
and they
swimming
throw you
around
in the
in
Ultra
pipes that are
Snap-on.
kind of
And you
vaguely
became
gynecological. There's a cosmological section, a pharmaceutical section, and just a rough recipe section. The herbal section spans more than half of the
direct
totality of the
core.
manuscript at 112
so good.
folios, though the other sections are often the most densely packed.
They're
with
gonna hit.
Voynich
You know, you
text,
don't want to be a hillbilly
Voynich Ds, as we
nowadays.
call
With
it.
just
It contains
you would
over
have
170,000
certain
characters
fields.
of an alphabet.
Then
roughly
you catch
20 to
your
25
hillbilly
characters
that'll
in
be like,
totality,
that's fusion, right?
gathered into apparently
Because I said
28,000
so.
fluently
Perfect
written
3x3
words.
there.
Words. There's no punctuation, and stranger still, there's virtually no internal corrections
You'll
to
feel
the
whatever you
text.
want with
About 12, maybe total.
Being that we
12.
pumped so
The
much
codex is
masonry
incomplete as we
and
have it. There's some
mathematics
sections
and
that were
some of
removed
it's practical
prior to the text being
FMA,
acquired
you'll
by
need
book
some kind of
dealer
quantifiable
Wilfred
speed.
Voynich
So
in 1912. Since
Again,
1969, it's been housed at the Yale
this
University
3x3, this
Banki Rare Book
quantum leap,
and Manuscript
right? You
Library,
know, the
which
evolution of the monkey.
is an amazing
Outlaw.
place.
And then
Carbon
the jump
dating of
rule
the
over the
vellum
Olympics,
places its
right?
production
9.
between
Salty's got a
1404
9
and
meter, Sharpshoots
1438 with
pulling the
about
7, Rose
95%
River, she got
accuracy on that
7,
reading.
Perkins,
The
05.
script and
you know.
illustrations are consistent
He's
with
Woodridge
that dating.
for Sergeant Everett,
It
or
first
Sergeant Major
enters into
Everett.
history
You're gonna have
sometime
to.
in the late
What were they
16th,
doing? So
early 17th
there's a
century
Salty. They
in
move.
the
They
court
can
of
do
the
a couple of moves. They can go this way or that way, straight,
Mercurial
or
Holy
they could
Roman Emperor Rudolph
decide to
II, because
implode.
Of course it does. From there, it would make its way to Rome in the hopes of a decipherment by the famed scholar Athanasius
It'd
Kircher.
be more different in
Following his
Oxford,
death, it
the
was
bulk
held
of
by
the
the
student over
Jesuits
there, because legal precedence
in the
on
Collegio
frame
Romano
rates
until
of
purchased by
photon,
Voynich.
photoelectric effect,
Despite
and electric
centuries of
field.
modern attempts
So let's
to
go into the
text
office and
remains
change the route anyways.
undeciphered. Is it a
Let's go
topic
Tarek
on
guy, I think you got,
esoterica?
yeah.
If it were
Worry
deciphered,
before
it
you
would be
kid.
a topic on
Hit you with some anthill stuff,
exoterica.
anthill kid stuff, nail you to the tree.
At this point, the general cryptological consensus is that the Voynich is either an unknown natural language, a known natural language that's been encrypted, a constructed language that's either encrypted or not, and a possible non-language meant to look like a language. It's very
Yes.
unlikely it's a known
Yes.
natural language, or even a known natural language in some form of medieval cryptography or medieval
I'm
encryption.
gonna do it like this.
Frankly,
I'm gonna do gravity.
computational
Some
cryptological
people aren't gonna
analysis
make
would have
it.
very likely
Some
revealed
people
that
just
by
aren't
now, and
into
such
that
analysis
frame rate, so you have to
contraindicates that
kind of like
possibility,
split
especially
that
from a
down by two,
statistical
man.
point
You
of
have
view.
to go through it
Now, it could
on a
be an
three-man
exotic
system to
natural
do
language,
X,
that is to
is
say
to
a
really push that,
non-native
because it's the
language
rock
of
at
the
that point in
region in
time.
which
Put
the
do a penny,
manuscript was
18, 20 on the
produced,
day.
written in a kind of
20,
custom-made
well, let's say
script
get
for
24,
that
that's clean
language
3,
at that time.
you know,
The
so,
problem here is that computational analysis of the manuscript reveals properties that
or,
no known
or-
natural language of the 57, 58, 5900 or so natural known languages in
minutes
the
here.
world
Yeah.
seem to have. It has weird properties unknown in any natural
changes
language.
involved.
For instance, Voynich-Keys, as it's called, does obey Zipf's laws, revealing that it was very likely produced by a method that was not purely stochastic,
frame
which is
rates,
to say
push it
it's not
through,
just
watch the footage,
random
make sure you're running
gibberish.
9-footers into
Further,
it there,
its
all the
second
way
order
over.
entropy, this is a
Pull the
measure
air
of the
crane,
relative
so it's
chaos
service
or
rated for the air
internal
crane.
informational
You know, it's
relations
the
of
move,
the
you gotta
text,
do it like that,
do
turn it
appear
over,
language-like
and
from
then
a
figure out the
statistical
button.
point of view, though it's actually much
you just
lower
don't
in
do
terms
this
of its
for the next
entropic
8 hours.
fingerprint than one might expect. Further, the words of the text seem to follow a roughly binomial
Nice
distribution.
to make money, because
With
sometimes
such
it's
a
hard to make money
distribution
doing
and
escrow
entropy
therapy. You
markers, the
got
going
escrow
theory for a
therapy guy out
while
there, it's
there
trouble.
was what's called the Chinese theory, that Voynich was in an East Asian language written in a Latin-like script, though not indicating the tones. This would be used to explain why there are so many very strange repetitions found in the text, sometimes the same word repeating
Yeah,
over and
but
over again in
variegated.
one line.
And full
Lacking
color.
tone
And
signatures,
it's in a
the
full
apparent
color
repetitions
palette.
would be different words and pronunciation, but not in transcription.
I'll tell you exactly what
Though
that is.
more
Well, you're gonna
recent
have to train
statistical
somebody.
studies have revealed that while some natural
have to
languages
anyway,
do
Sun Tzu
have
stuff.
some of the traits
Heaven
displayed
forbid,
by
I was the guy that broke
Voynich-Keys,
my
none
leg.
of them
What then?
have
Huh?
all
No,
or
then
even
don't worry.
enough of them to prove to be really viable candidates to be the language. Polynesian
no.
languages, for instance, have similar entropy signatures. Chinese and Vietnamese have binomial syllable
horse.
distributions,
Bull
and
rice
various
mother.
agglutinative languages might mirror the pre, post, and infixes of apparent bases in Voynich-Keys, but
Shangri-La.
ultimately, the exceptions found in Voynich-Keys to any other natural language
When
make it
hypervigilance meets
highly unlikely
PSTD,
the
and you
text
gotta
is
have an
even
Uber
an
tip on the
unknown,
table for the
even
military
exotic
guys that step
natural
in.
language. What we're looking
Oh,
at
big
is
guy.
not a
Perkins?
natural language written in an
Well,
otherwise
multi-name.
unknown alphabet. Further, if the text were an enciphered European language, it would be highly unlikely that it would
Turn
have
around.
surpassed the cryptological horizon of its day.
We're into the
mid-15th
prison,
century.
college,
While
variables,
homophonic and
director
polyalphabetic
information
ciphers did exist
technologies,
at
when you're
that
doing
time,
box in the box,
such
and you're
encryption
doing
is
CNBC.
It's easily
what
defeated
Yahoo
using
Finance,
contemporary
Bloomsburg,
cryptoanalysis.
I mean, there's
Even
those.
the Vigenère cipher
you're
developed in
doing
the
the politics,
1550s
it's a
following
little
work
bit
by
choppy
Trithemius
around
and
here
Della
and there.
Porta,
Or
was
they
considered
would be running some
indefeasible
crypto. I mean, if anything, some
until it was
firewall
defeated
pattern
in
on, like, okay, so that's 7,
1863.
and I can make those ones and
The
zeros.
most complicated cipher of the
Do
Middle Ages
that.
was defeated in 1863.
Guess
Indeed, the
can't.
very
Yeah,
length of the
go back
Voynich
to the
militates
source code.
against a very strong
Get in there,
encryption
hello,
technique, and the fluency of the writing of the text either argues that the Voynich is not being encrypted on the
rolled in here,
fly,
13th
or that
warrior
it's a
down there,
fair
rolled
copy
in
of the
there,
now
Orpheus,
lost preliminary
hanging with
encryption
Sagittarius.
crib
and-
sheet. In other words, even the strongest medieval encryption was
There are
broken
a
by
few
the 19th century
Masons that
using
really get good
pre-machine,
with the
much
library.
less pre-computational
Evolution
aided
of
analysis.
Lucy there.
Though some ciphers, especially brief ones,
You're gonna
do
get good with
indeed
codes,
elude analysis.
ADP,
For instance,
IMA,
the Zodiac Killer's
Bluestone Mold,
340
whatever it may
cipher remained unbroken for almost 50
This
years,
you will grab.
mostly because of its brevity
Well, Axe Murderer
and,
run around,
frankly,
gives you cookie crumb, CMB
because
in
of the
background.
encoding errors made by the Zodiac Killer in
Okay,
the encryption
so
process.
what's more
However,
important here is
the
to hack
cipher
it
is to be
inverted,
found in an actual army manual of the time, and with some supercomputers in Australia running the 650,000
Without everybody
iterations
reading,
and
computers
a
didn't do
really
anything to
ingenious
feed it.
hunch that the encryption ran along the diagonals, the code was eventually broken just recently,
Facebook.
and it provided us another glimpse into the nightmarish mind
well, that's my
of
time.
that killer. Of course,
Got
the
her
text
down.
could also be a construction